Today, we're going to talk about don't stress about stress. And I love what's happening in the chat right now. It just took one person saying hello for so many other people to say hello to in the chat. And so I just want you to think about that as we talk about stress today, because often it is just one small action that creates a chain reaction of good, positive change. And so hold on to that as we think about stress. All right. So these are some of our upcoming events in terms of wellness programs through the Wellness and Work-Life Office. We've got health screenings, wellness classes, and programs that we would love for y'all to participate in. If you aren't signed up for our newsletter, make sure that you do that at wellness.ua.edu. You're welcome to take a screenshot of this really quickly. And just know that if you do sign up for the newsletter, you get this to your inbox, and we would love for you to take advantage of your employee benefits. So definitely know that if you participate and complete a health screening, a wellness class, and a program, you can get up to $100 in gift cards. And you also get to know your numbers. That's something that we say is so important. Know your numbers, meaning know what you weigh, know what your BMI is, know what your blood work, shows in terms of, where you are on the health spectrum, so that you can make good lasting changes. All right, I'm going to just check the chat and make sure I don't see anything that I may have missed. Just some people saying hello again. If there are topics that you would like for us to cover today, definitely put those in the chat. If you have a question, try to use the Q&A box. It does have an anonymous feature, but that also helps me and know how to answer your questions and when to answer your questions. And so we'll have some time at the end for those as well. All right. So today we're going to say, don't stress about stress. Let's normalize stress. And here's what I mean by that. Oftentimes we think about stress as if our goal is to get rid of the stress, as if we should not have any stress. And that is not a reasonable expectation. If we are living, breathing, working with others, interacting with people, we're going to have some level of stress, and that is okay. And so I want you to have that mindset going into the talk today, because if we think that our goal is to be free of stress, totally stress-free is always my joke. That is a playlist on Spotify, and it's a really good playlist, but it is not our goal, because we need stress to make ourselves pay attention to what matters, to pay attention to our health and our wellness. And so definitely think about that as we move forward. Okay, my name is Abby Horton, and I'm a registered nurse, a certified health and life coach, a well-being ambassador for the Honors College, and a wellness class educator. So that's why I'm with y'all today. And you can contact me at abby.horton@ua.edu if you have any questions, if you want to reach out, maybe you need a resource, or you just want to connect. So definitely reach out if I can be of help. All right. Yes, and as we said in the chat, we are not going to be stress-free, but we are going to learn how to make stress our friend and how to maybe stress a little better. So I want you to check in with your mood right now. Tell me on, the range of the kind of angry, squinty, maybe sad, mad face that's red. We're going to use the kind of the red light, green light system, all the way to the happy, heart eyes, green smiley face. Kind of where are y'all feeling? You don't have to put it in the chat, but if you would like to, please feel free to do that. I want y'all to think about that, because we're going to check in a little bit later and see how you feel at the end of today's talk. I'm hoping we're going to all be in the green area over here. Orange, thank you for sharing. Yellow right in the middle, light green, yellow, yellow. And it's okay to be in orange and red. You might be in orange and red, and you might be green later, or vice versa. So yeah, a lot of people here are kind of in the middle. I think that that's pretty typical of how we live our lives and our days. Okay, so hang on to that feeling, and we will come back to that. So if you haven't put that in the chat and you want to, please feel free to go ahead and do that. We'll continue to check in there. Awesome. All right, and I do think we live a lot of our lives in the middle. So know that that's okay. We're going to fluctuate in terms of our mood throughout the day, and that is also normal. And I'm going to say normal in air quotes because normal is relative. But I want you to know that we don't always need to live in the green, and we don't always need to live in the red and the orange, because to be human is to feel the range of emotions. And I think sometimes we think we should always be happy. And there is a new term called toxic positivity, where we expect ourselves to always be happy. Like, oh, I know I'm having a hard time with this, but it's all good. I'm fine. And that, that is not always the optimal way. We always say that you need to feel your feelings. And so much of stress, I think, that we manage on a day-to-day basis is really living out of alignment with who we are and what we value and what we want most. And when we know that we're having a hard time, but we feel like we need to put on a green, happy face and tell the world that we're okay, I think that is one of the biggest obstacles to truly being happy and full of joy and moving forward and managing our stress well. I hope this is resonating with y'all. I always like to include this slide about time to relax because, anytime someone tells you to relax, it's usually kind of the antithesis of that. You usually really can't relax and you feel a little like, I feel a little stressed. But the beach is my happy place and it's where I can truly relax and I don't have to work for it. So I want y'all to think about your happy place. That's somewhere that you can actually use in meditation or when you're having a stress response, when you get that email or that calendar invite that stresses you out, or you have something that comes up that you weren't expecting, you can kind of take a couple of minutes, go to your happy place, close your eyes. And if you're thinking about the beach, or maybe it's the mountains for you or wherever, that is mindful meditation. We think it has to be fancy. We think that it has to be that we're, crisscross applesauce on the floor doing a fancy yoga pose. But meditation can just be taking a deep breath and closing your eyes, disconnecting. It could be listening to music in your car. There's so many different ways to give your brain a break. And I think that's what we need right now in our lives more than ever, myself included. All right, so I want you to look at these graphics while I check the chat again. Okay, more people coming in with light green. That's good. So the goal really is not to think about stress as being bad or think about stress as something we need to get rid of or to get rid of all of our negative thoughts and feelings, because really what that first graphic says is that's impossible, and it truly is. So our goal is to change how we're responding to stress and stressors. We're not going to worry about what we can't control. We're going to focus on the things that we can control, which is illustrated here in this third box, where it's basically your attitude, your effort, the boundaries that you set, the things that are truly in your control. And then the last graphic is a Venn diagram, which I'm always a fan of, that shows that things that matter and the things that you can control, where those two things overlap is where you should focus, because there are definitely things that you can control that in the grand scheme of things are not going to matter. And then there are things that are certainly very significant and important that we can't control, and that can be very frustrating and lead to a stress response that's hard to recover from. I have a lot of slides today, more than I likely will get through, but Miranda will share those as a link in the chat box at the end of today's program. And I want you to just use this as a menu of things that you can try when you're feeling overly stressed, okay? So we're going to talk about stress and the effect of that on your personal well-being, talk about the difference between stress and anxiety and depression and overwhelm and burnout, because those all go hand in hand. We're going to talk about effective coping strategies, which is my favorite part, because we all know really what stress is and how it affects us. We know the things that we want to avoid in that sometimes, but we don't know how to get beyond that. And that's my favorite thing to do. And we're going to actually look at stress and ineffective coping. We're going to talk about how to implement and evaluate your coping strategies, because we want you to be able to alleviate your stress. So we may not be truly entering a stress-free zone, but I do want you to really take this time for yourselves. Maybe, close your door if you have a door that you can close. Maybe take your kind of few minutes away to actually exit out of your Outlook so that you're not hearing the constant dings, that sort of thing, so that you can really give yourself your full time and attention. Because when we multitask, a lot of times our brain feels like we're engaged, but we don't really walk away with the things that we need. And multitasking is a very real symptom and kind of perpetrator of this stress cycle that I'm going to talk about today. So we're going to begin with gratitude. Gratitude matters so much, because when you're walking through difficult times, there are definitely roadblocks to overcoming the stressors that you might have. It might be a lot of responsibilities at home. Maybe you have young children. Maybe you're in the sandwich generation where you're caring for young children and parents. Maybe it's that you aren't in a relationship and you want to be. Maybe you're in graduate school. Maybe you are at a kind of a fork in the road and you're trying to make decisions about your life or your career. There's so many things that could be going on in your lives. But what I want to encourage you is try to start with gratitude. And it's not about how many things that you can write down on a piece of paper that you're grateful for. It's that you truly, in the moment, recognize that you're grateful. This morning, someone let me out in traffic, and y'all know that doesn't happen a lot in our area. And so for someone to stop in morning rush hour traffic and to let me merge in when they didn't have to, that was a moment where normally I would feel a little relief, but I wouldn't pause and think, wow, I really appreciate that. So I made sure that the person saw me wave so that they knew I was truly grateful that they let me out in traffic. That is a little thing, but what I have learned is when you go through hardship, those are the kinds of things that really make a difference in your attitude. And when you start noticing those little things, then you're going to notice the bigger things as well. It just changes your whole response to the stress in your life. And if you knew me in real life, you would know that I have had a lot of stress, a lot of challenges to overcome. And if we have time, I may share some, anecdotal stories of that throughout. But just know that my life is not perfect. It has a lot of real challenges in it. And so I'm not speaking from a place of my life is great and I'm telling you to love and appreciate your life, because mine is that way too. I'm telling you my life is hard, and that is why I am so grateful, because there are moments where we can truly appreciate that. So when we're talking about controlling what you can control, if you don't practice gratitude, you're giving away your power, you're giving away your agency, and you're letting the stress and the world and everything that's happening to you feel like it's happening to you. And what I want you to think about is maybe it's happening for you. So maybe it's putting you in a position where you need to be to get to the next point in your journey in your life. And so that is a radical notion, but if you can think about it that way, I do think it will make things a little easier. We're going to talk about acceptance of stress a little bit later, and that's such a huge part of accepting what's going on in your life by being able to have some gratitude for it and finding the moments where you can feel better about your situation. So Eckhart Tolle says, acknowledging the good that you already have in your life is the foundation, for all abundance. And I truly believe that. So when we look at stress and we think about, our physical health, our mental well-being, one of the things that we often don't talk about is this notion that our physical health, our mental health, those are things that give us indicators that we are in or out of alignment with ourselves, our values, our beliefs, our goals. Those are things that can be roadblocks or even road signs on our journey. And so if you're having physical health symptoms, if you're having mental health symptoms, there is this Whole Health Karen, which is what you see here on the screen. It was developed by Dr. Lisa Rankin. She is an OBGYN who now does more complementary and alternative medications and protocols and things in her practice and takes a more naturopathic approach. And so she developed this because she was seeing patients that she couldn't truly help with the typical, pills and procedures that she would prescribe as an OBGYN. And so she decided to look at how our mental and physical health impact everything else. And this is called a Karen because it's stacked stones. You'll see another version of this a little bit later. And it's really that, we have this inner pilot light or intuition, or some people who have a strong religious belief system may call it something else, may have to do with their religious beliefs and values, or it could be spiritual. But there's this inner knowing or inner wisdom or intuition. Some people would even say inner child that knows what we want and need. But there's so many other things happening in our world that we often don't listen to that quiet voice of, direction and telling us what we should be doing or telling us what it is we really want. And I know that can feel a little out there, but just hold on with me and see if it resonates for you. So in this bubble, we have service and love and pleasure and gratitude. And when we start to get out of alignment with ourselves, our physical health will usually be the first sign. And we often will medicate or we'll self-medicate or we'll numb or we'll distract ourselves and not really pay attention to this physical health symptom that we're having. And when we don't listen there, then we start to have mental health effects and we start to have mental health symptoms. And then often it's money and environment and creativity and sexuality and spirituality and work and life and relationships. All of that kind of starts to tumble. But what Lisa Rankin says is that the first stone that tumbles or that topples over is usually physical health, followed by mental health. And that's how we know we need to really think about our stress and where we are in our lives, doing a self inventory of where we are. Because we're at the beginning of a new year, I think that gives us a lot of motivation and extra energy and enthusiasm to do this work. And so I would really encourage you, if you think that you need help with this, consider some of the things we're going to share today as self-care strategies and coping strategies that you can implement to give yourself time to really think about your life and do an inventory of where you are. We all go through different seasons of life, and so we grow, we change, hopefully, and it's important to really get to know ourselves in this new season. Mind, body, and spirit are intimately connected, and it's important that we remember that. So stress is really defined as the mental and physical result of a lack of tools to cope with demands or pressures of a situation. And that gets to be, more of a medical or research definition. I like this definition here too, is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. Really, stress is when we feel like we have more to do than what we can actually do on our own, and we're not sure if we're going to be able to cope. So stress types, we have stress, which is that disturbance that we just defined. Stressors are going to be the stimuli or the trigger that, causes that perception of the challenge. And it could be physical, it could be emotional or mental. There are lots of different types of stressors. You can have acute stress, meaning that you've got an upcoming deadline and you're just a little bit stressed about meeting that. You can have chronic stress, meaning that you have a lot of life circumstances that are causing you stress all day, every day, over a long extended period of time. And then you can even have complex stress or post-traumatic stress disorder. There's also a complex PTSD. And we often think about PTSD with veterans or those who've experienced, violence or, wars and conflicts and things like that. But we know from our research that the typical, average American housewife or mom is also at risk. And that's one of the growing groups of people who report having PTSD symptoms, because it's not just about violence. It's not just about being exposed to war times and conflict. It's also about, complex, what we call little t traumas, where it's a series of traumatic events that cause you to have this disorder, and it results in a dysregulated nervous system. And that's why it makes it difficult for you to handle the stress of a deadline that's coming up, or the stress of, having to, figure out a schedule for maybe a child or a parent, because you already are so overloaded with a stress response that you chronically keep kind of at a simmering level in the background that you may or may not be aware of. And so just know that PTSD comes in various forms, and none of us are immune, unfortunately. So stress factors, they can be anything from internal to external to developmental to situational. There are some examples listed here for you. There is some overlap for sure, but I just want to call your attention to that. I'm going to read the chat comment. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's so difficult, I think, sometimes to want to be vulnerable and share from our experiences. I know for me, I always felt as if talking about stress, sometimes if you talk about it in a way where it's like, oh, I'm so busy and stressed, I know you are too, it almost takes out the authenticity of letting someone else share the burden of your stress with you. And so I always appreciate when people are willing to share their stories with us. So thank you for that. So there is overlap. You can have a developmental and a situational stressor. You can have an internal and an external stressor. And so here are some examples of that. I just want you to know that with developmental or situational stressors, we hope that those eventually are going to move into a different season for you. The, automobile crash will hopefully soon be over without any lasting effects. Developmentally, your parents, your kids, yourself, you're going to move to a different stage and you're going to have a different set of stressors. But what you want to notice is if you're staying stuck in those situations, or maybe the situation has resolved itself, but you still feel the stress in your body, then that's when you need to kind of look to your resources and see, where do I need to go for help? That may be a mental health professional, that may be a psychiatrist, a psychologist, it may be our behavioral health program, it may be a counselor, it may be coaching, it depends. It may be that you need to see your medical doctor. But there are definitely times where we need to reach out for our help and have a different perspective. We need to rely on our network and our support system. So identifying sources of stress is really important. Some of our stresses might be, at work. Some of them likely are at home. Most of you probably have both. I know that I do. I'm not, beyond having stress for sure. And so I have stress both at work and at home. And usually it's good stress. And what we call good stress is eustress, EUSTRESS. And it's where they're all good sources of stress. It might be welcoming a new baby. It might be a new promotion at work. That's happiness, that's the joyful experience, but there are stressors accompanying that. So here are some things that just are listed to jog your thought process. Where are you feeling sources of stress? That's going to be important so that you can take action on managing those stressors and your response to them. So stress is the body's automatic response to any physical or mental demand on it. If we know that we need to lift something heavy, then our body is going to have a physical stress on itself because we've got to pick up something heavy. We've got to, engage our core muscles in our abdomen. We've got to tighten our backs. We've got to, really think about lifting. That's a physical stressor on our body. Exercise is a physical stressor on our body. We often think about, stress and exercise, and that exercise relieves stress, and it does, and it can. But if you have an autoimmune condition, if you are, physically, sick or not feeling well, if you have certain challenges, then actually working out to your max capacity could be an unhelpful stressor. Maybe you just need to take a gentle walk, or maybe you need to go for a swim. And so I think that that's really important for us to consider, is that there's not a one size fits all approach to stress. We have adrenaline and cortisol and other hormone responses in relationship to stress, and that makes it really difficult to overcome. So we'll go back to my example for morning traffic. If I had been in a near miss accident today, if I had to slam on my brakes in traffic this morning to keep from hitting the car in front of me, y'all all have probably had to do that if you've been driving for any length of time. Y'all know that feeling that you get when you almost hit someone, or maybe that you do hit someone. It's that feeling of you feel like you're a little on fire. Your skin feels warm. You start sweating a little bit. Your heart starts racing. You feel maybe a little jittery. That is from the adrenaline and cortisol response, preparing your body to engage with this stressor. The unfortunate thing is that our nervous system and our brains and our bodies are still very much on this plan of, it doesn't know the dings and the bells and whistles on our devices and our emails when we feel stressed about an email response. It's hard for our bodies to respond to that differently than it does in a real life situation where you're trying to brake to avoid the car in front of you, or maybe you have a dog that is chasing you in the neighborhood. Our bodies have a very similar reaction regardless of what the stressor is. So whether it's an email, or like for my students, a test or a deadline for all of us, versus a real danger of a car accident or an animal, we don't always distinguish that. And so what I want to tell you, and this may be the one nugget that you take away from the talk today, I hope it's this one. It's that, one, you have the power to change your mindset and be grateful and look at things in a different light. But two is move your body. When you get something that comes to you that's upsetting to you in whatever form, you need to get up from your chair, get out of your car, whatever you're doing, you need to get up and move your body. And walking is the best way to do that, because that's going to reset your hormone response. The eye movement that you have when you walk actually mimics what you do in EMDR therapy, which helps retrain and reactivate the brain in a different way to respond to stress response. And it helps clear those hormones that happen. It's a hormonal cascade that takes effect. And so then you're able to actually get some physical exercise. You get a new, change of pace, a new scenery, and you get to clear the hormones. Usually the hormonal feeling and response that you have to a stressor goes away at a physical level in about 2 to 3 minutes. But the reason that we continue to feel upset or worried or anxious about this is because we do what we call rumination, where we're thinking about that. And when we think about the problem, the stressor, we have a very similar, if not the same response in terms of our chemistry to that situation as we did when it actually happened. So the more that we think about it, the more we ruminate on it, the more we're going to feel those feelings and have those hormonal responses. So it may have only happened one time. We may have had one bad, incident in the day. And the reason it's kind of ruined our whole day is because we've thought about it the rest of the day, or we've talked about it the rest of the day. And our body is always listening. Our brain is always listening, and it doesn't know the difference that it's not continually happening. So if you can make that one change, I think that will really be something that helps you manage your stress. We talk about the fight or flight response, the saber-toothed tiger scenario where the cave person sees a saber-toothed tiger and they have to decide if they're going to, fight the tiger, face it and fight it, or if they're going to flee, take flight. But we also have a freeze response. And so that freeze response is something like, I don't know what to do. I feel stuck. I'm overwhelmed. If you say that continuously, it's because you're having a freeze response to stress. And truly, you are in that stress cycle of you don't know what to do, you don't know where to start, and that can lead to overwhelm. So stress has positive and negative effects. We've talked a lot about the more negative effects, but stress helps us to plan and prepare. It helps us to be on our A game. It helps us to, keep our body conditioned to respond in case we really do need to rely on that fight or flight response to get us to safety. And so stress is needed. And moderate levels of stress actually have been shown to improve our performance and our efficiency, which is always a good thing. So our stressors that we mentioned, now we want to identify our triggers. So what are your individual triggers for stress? I want you to think about that. It might be that you're waking up late, so you're hitting snooze in the mornings. So that's a trigger for your stress. Your stress response is usually more heightened in the morning because your body knows it needs the extra chemicals and hormones to get ready for the day. So typically our cortisol is going to be highest around 7 o'clock in the morning. 7 o'clock is not a great time to be doing things that, are going to add to your stress because your cortisol is already pretty high. It starts to dip usually around 3 p.m., which is also when you start hearing the drink machine and the vending machine go off because your cortisol starts to dip. That can affect your blood sugar a little bit. And you need a little bit of a caffeine boost or carb boost. And so you run to the nearest place to get that. It's usually a vending machine or a break room or something. So you want to write down the triggers. It might be, okay, so you snoozed, you were running late, so then you forgot something at home. And then you got stuck in traffic and you were, trying to hope that someone would let you out in traffic and not hit the car in front of you. So you see that there's kind of a cascade of triggers that happen. And then you get to work and you open your email, you're already a little bit late, you're feeling rushed, you forgot something important at home, and you open the email and you already feel behind in the day and you have a bunch of things you need to take care of. And one of them is a little upsetting to you. I don't know if that feels like your work day sometimes, but if you're continuously in that cycle, then you're always going to feel behind and stressed. So writing down those triggers, the triggers might be that you're not preparing well the night before to get up on time. Maybe you're staying up too late on your devices. Maybe you're not, checking the weather and kind of getting your, clothes ready for the next day. Maybe you didn't prepare your lunch or your kids' lunch. Maybe you forgot to set your alarm, or maybe you're not taking care of your sleep, so you are feeling really groggy in the morning. That happens to all of us sometimes. So those are the kinds of triggers that you can start to actually look at, identify, and then change. So then if you want to have a good start to your morning, that really starts the night before. So you want to avoid or limit your triggers as much as you can. Respond to the ones that you can respond to. Think about self-care and stress management strategies to help you cope. And then decide how you're going to respond when you are late or when you do experience that trigger. Because honestly, you can have the best plan and you can implement that plan, but sometimes life is just going to happen to you and you've got to decide, okay, when my kid drops the dinner plate, and breaks it during dinner, how am I going to respond in that moment? When I am inevitably late one morning, how am I going to respond? When I get that upsetting email, how am I going to respond? Not only practically, how am I going to respond, but also how am I going to adjust my mindset around that? And those are so important. So responses to stress, again, here are all of the things that happened if you were in that scenario of slamming on your brakes to avoid the car in front of you. But you can have anxiety, fear, anger, hostility, depression. You can have that fight or flight response, the cortisol release, and the freeze response, which I see a lot of that more often than not. Some other things that I want to mention of stress is that you can really have a body, mind, behavior, and emotion connection. So back to that mind, body, spirit. We are, often thinking about ourselves as systems. We think about our kidneys, or we think about our lungs, or we think about, some system in the body from that background in nursing. But really, mind, body, spirit all works together as a holistic entity. And so when you have a stressor, maybe you are walking around campus and you trip and you sprain your ankle, you're going to have, real pain and body symptoms from that and from the inflammation. But you also could have some psychological symptoms from that because you're like, oh goodness, I tripped again. I'm kind of irritated with myself about that. Now that's going to affect my ability to go to the new yoga class I wanted to go to. So I'm going to be letting my friend down. And now I'm in pain, so I'm distracted, so I can't get my to-do list done. Okay, so that's how mind, body, spirit, behavior, emotions, all of that work together. So when you have stress, it can affect your confidence if it's long-term, or if it's acute and it's a really critical stressor. You can have apprehension, which is really all about fear, indifference or apathy, depression, irritability, insomnia, anxiety. You can start to change your behaviors. Maybe you're numbing out, maybe you're self-medicating, maybe you are taking medication, which sometimes is really needed. Your mind, you can start to worry, you can start to question yourself. So you have indecision, maybe imposter syndrome. Your body, you start to have headaches, stomach aches, frequent infections. These are real symptoms that you feel for a real reason. It's because your body is taking in the stressor, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, and it's taking those steps to alert you. And sometimes we ignore those signs and those symptoms. So approaches to stress management. You can alter the stressor, you can adapt to the stressor, you can avoid the stressor, or you can accept the stressor. And sometimes you need to do all four. You need to try to alter it, you need to try to adapt, you need to try to avoid it. But ultimately, if you can't change it, you need to accept it. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because our survival instincts tell us to fight. Our survival instincts tell us to flee or fight. And so if we're fleeing, sometimes that looks like we're hanging out on Instagram or Facebook or social media. Sometimes that looks like that, we're running toward a distraction. But ultimately, we've got to be able to accept. It doesn't mean that we give up. It doesn't mean that we, don't try. It doesn't mean that we don't have a good attitude. It just means that we accept. I'm going to accept right now that this is my situation. I am going to share a personal story. I hadn't, planned to share this one, but I was diagnosed with a rare liver tumor in September, and it has been quite the process of figuring out next steps. And so there is some concern that there may be a second tumor, and imaging has not shown conclusive evidence of what next steps look like. And so I will be skipping a biopsy and going straight to surgery. And there are a lot of unknowns around the diagnosis and all of the things that encompass that. And so meanwhile, I feel like I am, carrying on business as usual. With other stressors. So for example, within the last 6 weeks, we have had multiple roof leaks. So we need a new roof at my house. Our dishwasher stopped working and could not be repaired with a new part, unfortunately. So it had to be replaced. we, have had our washer and dryer, some issues with those, that ultimately our dryer stopped working. It needs a new switch. I'm learning lots about house maintenance and appliances in my life. Our minivan, which, carries my 5 kiddos. I have 2 sets of twins. And so their ages 10 to 15. So my minivan, that is, the hardest working member of our family, is having some mechanical issues, multiple mechanical issues, actually. And so, I mean, and that's just off the top of my head, some of the other things that are going on besides this diagnosis that I've had. And so when I tell you that you really have to choose your mindset, I have to remind myself that every day. Unfortunately, I can't do a lot of avoidance with it, or, I can't alter that, but I can try to adapt, and I can try to accept that this is the situation I have, and that I'm just going to have to make the next best decision, the next, quote unquote, right decision for me. And so I hope that that is inspiring to y'all, because sometimes when I go to talks and I hear people tell me that they need to, be grateful and accept things, and they seem so happy and they seem like their life is so together, the human mind wants to tell us, oh, well, they don't understand. They don't have the stressors or problems that I have, or, their life looks so together on Instagram or Pinterest. And so I want to encourage you that that's not always the case. And I think you have to have some credibility of, I've walked through hard things, to ask you to trust that some of the guidance I'm suggesting for you might actually work for you. That to me has always been impactful when speakers have shared some of their personal stories. So I hope that does for you. Adaptation to stress. So coping, resourcefulness, and we hear a lot about resilience kind of in a post-COVID world. And here's the thing, my dissertation and my research has been on mental health and resilience over the last 5 or so years. And resilience is often defined as the ability to bounce back. And what I want to tell you is that they always usually, you see, if you Google resilience, you get images, and the image is always like a weed growing out of, asphalt or concrete, which I think is fun. Or it's a ball, like a bouncy ball that you would get in a gumball machine that is bouncing back. And that's not really what resilience is. When you look at resilience in the research, it's really the capacity to move forward even when there is so much adversity and challenges in your way. It's not bouncing perfectly back, toxic positivity, everything's fine, I'm just going to ignore that, my life is challenging. It's not always going back to baseline, but it's the ability to really push forward in the face of some really hard times and challenging times. Resilience can be learned. There's certainly components to it that help you in terms of, genetics and nature versus nurture. That's always a topic in resilience. But I think more than anything that you need to hear today is resilience is a choice, just like mindset, just like gratitude. And unfortunately, the resilience that you have builds over time. So people tell me all the time, oh, you're so resilient, or oh, you're so strong. And I've always really identified with that personally. But what I've learned walking through this last kind of chapter of my journey lately is that I'm resilient and strong because I've had to be. And so I don't want to identify as resilient or strong anymore, because I want to get to a point where that's not part of my story. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of things that have caused me to build resilience. And so resilience is not necessarily a training that you can do, a certificate that you can get, but it's really a lifestyle of embracing, this is a hard time. What is it teaching me? How can I overcome this? That's how you build resilience. Unfortunately, that's going to mean that you have to really feel your feelings. It's going to mean that you have to go through some challenging times. And that's not something any of us really want to sign up for. But that is the importance of resilience. Being resourceful, thinking of ways to get help to overcome challenges, reach out to, people in your network, use the campus resources. That's all about resourcefulness. And we're very fortunate to have so many great free or reduced cost resources here on campus as part of our community and benefits. And then learning to cope. Y'all, we would all love a life that we don't need to cope from. And so, it's like the popular memes that you see, I don't want a life I need a vacation from. Well, we have the responsibility of building that and making different choices so that our everyday, it's not always going to feel like a vacation, but it's a life that we can really love and appreciate despite the fact that we do have challenges. And that's how you adapt. So managing stress is going to improve your physical and mental health, your emotions, and it will actually improve your ability to focus. And sometimes when we feel overwhelmed, we push through. We don't take bathroom breaks. We don't take our lunch break. Nurses, my hand included, is raised. We're the worst about that. And so sometimes to get ahead and to be more productive, it's that we need to have some productive rest. There are different types of rest. And if you do a quick Google search, you can kind of go through. Sometimes we don't just need physical rest, but we need mental rest. We need emotional rest. We need spiritual rest. So there's usually around 9 types of rest that you can need. And I think if you still feel tired after you take a nap or after you get a good night's sleep, there may be something physical going on, but there may be other needs that are not being met, which is why you're still feeling tired. So take action. Action builds momentum. That inspires your motivation. That leads to more action. And usually that will lead to discipline. Here's the thing. You can't rely on momentum alone or motivation alone, because that's going to wax and wane. How we wake up, how we feel about life, how controlled our inbox is, those are going to be things that really deplete our motivation. It's going to wax and wane. But when we take action, we feel more confident in ourselves and our abilities. It does build that momentum. And really what we want to rely on is discipline, because when we have discipline, we're going to show up even on the days where we don't feel like it. So I want you to just pick one thing and do it. Don't, constantly consume information. Don't constantly research, do your due diligence, but I want you to pick just one thing. There's so many goal setting plans and workbooks and free workshops. We have one ourselves through Wellness and Work Life that you can go and see on our archive talks. But if you try to do all of those, then all you're going to do is consume information on goal setting. You're not actually going to goal set and then actually work toward those goals. So pick one expert, pick one product, pick one goal, one value, whatever you're trying to work on, and then just take action. So things that you can do: work on your sleep hygiene. We've got lots of great resources about sleep on our site. Setting boundaries with yourself. Setting boundaries is not about other people's behavior. It's about how you're going to respond to other people's behavior. So you don't have to have anybody on board to have healthy boundaries. Meaningful connections, not just, hey, how are you? How often I am guilty of talking to my husband while I'm looking at my phone or doing something else, or, managing something of the household or the kids. Really taking time to make sure that I'm a hands-free human and that I'm, not looking at my phone, and I'm actually talking to my husband, to my best friend, to my coworker. Just this morning, I was distracted when I saw a coworker yesterday, and we were having a chat, but I was on my way to a meeting. And so when I was reflecting on my day, I said, I need to reach out to her and make sure she knows that I really appreciated what she had to say to me. And so this morning I found her and said, I don't feel like I gave you my full attention. And I just wanted to thank you for what you said and let you know that I was on my way to a meeting and I was thinking about that. And I'm sorry if I didn't give you my full attention. Meaningful connections are so important, and recognizing when we need to make changes also so important. Being playful, having hobbies, having fun. That's a goal for me, is to come up with a hobby this year. When people have asked about that, Abby, what's your hobby? I have hobbies, but they're not fun, cool hobbies that you want to tell people about. My hobby would probably be reading, but that doesn't feel like a cool hobby to share with people. And so that's a goal for me, because I've been asked that a lot, and that's not something that normally, people ask you every day. And so that was a clue for me of, I feel hesitation. I probably need to develop a hobby. What is it for you? I always like to tell people, when's the last time you did something fun? And then walking, just getting up out of your chair is such a good one for you to really break the cycle of feeling like you are stuck. Here's some health promotion activities and stress management techniques that we hear a lot about. I will say that my favorite ones are going to be, movement like yoga. That's such a good one for your body and for your brain. Vitamin G, practicing gratitude. Not that you have to list, 3 things every morning or 3 things every night, but I want you to think about bookending your day, starting your day with gratitude, ending your day with gratitude, and noticing things to be thankful for throughout the day. Getting outside in nature is so important. We need that grounding that comes from being in nature, being barefoot, being, out in the fresh air and sunshine. And then things like humor. I always tell people I'm not the fun one or the funny one in my family or in my relationships. And that's not really true. I'm pretty funny sometimes, but I don't identify that as part of my personality, but I do love to laugh. And so I have to remind myself it's okay to be fun. It's okay to be silly and not so serious. And so, making sure that you're hugging every day. They say research shows that 12 hugs a day is about how much you need, and that releases those good feel good hormones. So hug 12 times a day. My son Charlie is the happiest human that I know, and he gets well more than 12 hugs a day, and he always has a smile on his face generally. And it's because he loves to hug more than any person I've ever met. And so if you meet Charlie, he's going to ask if he can hug you. And so I had to take a lesson for that. Sometimes the people in our lives, even our kids, can teach us, some things that we need to think about. But listen to music, practice art, appreciate art if you're not an artist. Although I would argue everyone is. Van Gogh was quoted as saying, every kid is an artist and we're all just big kids. Dance, even if that's while you're cooking supper tonight and you're waiting on the water to boil or something. And journal, reflective journaling is really important, I think, too. Creating awareness around your needs is so important. I think we oftentimes will say, oh, well, I'll get to that later, and we procrastinate our health. But we also need to be able to be flexible and to prioritize what matters to us, making sure that we're working on the things and doing the things that really is going to what we call move the needle forward. Are we spending most of our time on the things that matter to us? Probably not. I would say for me, that's true even today, even though I know I'll consciously work on that. So create that good awareness. Cultivate calm, acknowledging your feelings, feeling your feelings. It's okay to be stressed sometimes. It's okay to feel anxious, but don't over identify with those emotions. You are not your diagnosis. You are not your feelings. You just are having a feeling. You are not, the embodiment of stress. You're just experiencing stress. And so try not to over identify with that. Just really take breaks from the news or anything that's unhelpful. If you feel stress or anxiety over someone that you follow on social media or a show that you watch on TV or, Netflix or Hulu, then take a break and see if that improves how you feel about life in general. When I'm feeling overly stressed, then I have to take a break from Instagram because everyone seems happy and perfect there, and I compare myself. One thing about comparison, we talk about that comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison can be really hard. One thing that I learned, again, I think this is another golden nugget for y'all today, because it really inspired me, even though it's super simple, is if I would not change or trade my entire life for the person's life that I'm jealous of, like maybe I'm jealous that they got an award, or maybe I'm jealous of their vacation, or maybe I'm jealous of their house or their new car. If I would not trade everything about their lives to have that one thing that I'm jealous about, that they're posting about on social media or that they're sharing with me or that I'm just seeing, then I don't let myself be jealous over that, because they have other things that they've walked through to be able to get those things. And so when I changed my mindset of like, I would not trade my life for their life, even though I'm happy for them, that I'm happy with my life as it is. I just might wish that I had had their really cool vacation. Then I think about ways that I could maybe have that really cool vacation in the future. I don't try to envy them or try to compare myself to them in that way. And I know that seems really simple, but it was life-changing for me. So I hope that's helpful for y'all. Stay connected, but avoid numbing out. And then I always tell people to ask for help early and often, because we all need help sometimes. So how do you know that you're out of balance? I think about riding a bicycle. I had not ridden a bicycle since I was a kid. My husband and I have been together for 17 years. We've been married for 16 years. And we did not ride bicycles together because we've been so busy and we have been so in this mode of doing the next thing and not really having fun as a priority, that on our 15th wedding anniversary trip, that was the first time that we had ridden a bicycle like together. And I mean, we had our own bicycles separately, but that was the first time we had just gone on a bike ride. And that's a part of some people's daily or weekly activities with their spouse or family that just hasn't been for us. And so I told him kind of on a whim, there are bicycles right there for rent for $10. Can we get those and go ride on this track? And he looked at me and he said, excuse me? Or what do you mean? Are we going to ride bicycles together? We've never done that before. And I said, and that's exactly why I want to do it. Y'all, that gave me so much joy as a nurse. If you didn't document it, it didn't happen. So we stopped and I took way too many pictures because I wanted to remember that moment that I decided to do something a little unexpected. There's nothing wild about riding a bicycle. I know that probably sounds silly to most of you, but for me, it was something that was really different. And I want you to find your bicycle moment. That's something that we all need, something to look forward to. There are physical, emotional, and personal, feelings of feeling out of balance. And it's that wobbly feeling of you're trying to get your balance on the bicycle and you're trying to get it to go forward. And the way forward, according to Winston Churchill, is this: you just keep going. And that's the same thing. When your bicycle feels out of balance, slowing down and stopping and quitting doesn't really work. You need a nice, even, steady pace. And of course, take breaks when you need to. Don't just push through feeling like you have to get to the end goal. And that responds to self-compassion. We talk about this a lot in our work-life balance presentation with my good friend and colleague, Allison Currington. I would really encourage you to go over to that presentation if this stuff resonates with you today. But self-compassion involves acting the same way towards yourself that you would, act towards someone else. So if you would be kind and considerate of someone else going through a hard or difficult time, then you deserve to give yourself that same level of compassion. So there's a compassion inventory link here, and then there are some different things that you can focus on in the areas of compassion that you might need to develop. That's something that I need to work on. Practicing self-compassion. Why are you not treating yourself like you would treat a good friend? So when you want to be unkind to yourself, think about what you would say and how you would say it to a friend if they were telling you that same thing, and then maybe act in that capacity if you have a difficult time giving yourself compassion. And that is a true struggle for me. And I am nowhere near to the point I need to be on that. But here are some things about, your feelings and how to start over and being allowed to say no. I think this is a really great graphic to emphasize what we're saying here. Preparing for success. I'll let you read through this on your own. You will have access to the PowerPoint. But these are some things that, practically speaking, you can start to do. Taking frequent breaks, having those scheduled into your calendar, having those on your phone, setting deadlines for yourself ahead of your actual deadline to give yourself some margin to be tired or be sick or for something to come up on your plate. Putting deadlines in your calendar ahead of the deadline, I think, is so important. My students a lot of times will miss an assignment because they have it scheduled on the day it's due, but they don't have the work that they needed, the study time, the work time to actually complete the assignment. So they wake up on a Monday and they see that something's due, and then they can't get it done because they haven't built in the work time to get it done. Making to-do lists, but actually prioritizing your task, usually picking 3 to 5 things as your main task for the day. Priorities is really kind of a misnomer because you can only truly have one priority at a time. And so that's important to consider. Really clearing the clutter. Our environment reflects, I think, what's going on with us internally. So let's make sure that if we feel a lot of clutter and chaos internally, that we make our outward environment be more conducive to us working through those things. I have some information on seeds of overwhelm. We do have a talk on overcoming overwhelm, but I wanted it to be here for your reference. Just try not to glorify being busy. I think we do that too much of, hey, how are you? Good. I'm, just busy like always. I'm so guilty of saying that because we see being busy as being productive, and that's not the same. And we think that our busyness makes us be, I guess, more valuable, I think, sometimes. So don't have unrealistic expectations for yourselves or others. Some sources of overwhelm. There are so many more that I could list here. I think really uncertainty, comparison, hustle culture, trying to do too much with too little. Those are sources of overwhelm for many people, myself included. Here are symptoms of overwhelm, things like maladaptive coping. So, binging on carbs and drinking too much caffeine, or being, really strongly emotional about something that doesn't really warrant that level of emotion, feeling stuck. Those are symptoms of overwhelm. And how you stop it is how you stop anything that you want to control, is you acknowledge it, you accept it, you reframe it. So think about how you can make it a neutral or positive reframing. You take a break and then you decide, okay, I'm going to be present where my feet are. I'm going to be present in this moment and what's important now. For me, what's important now when I get off this call is I have a lot on my plate, and I'm going to sit down with my piece of paper right here. I have a to-do matrix because I think in kind of a terms of a bento box, and I'm going to list out all of the things that I really need to get done and taken care of because I have a lot on my plate right now, and that's my next priority. I would encourage y'all to think about what that would be for y'all. And then know your resources and have someone that you can check in with, that you can have an accountability partner to check on you, and you can check on them and take action. So here's some, things about a path forward, what you can do when you're feeling overwhelmed. And again, treat this like a menu, do what you can with it. These are all very self-explanatory. But I really want you to think about challenging your assumptions on what you think is true and possible for you. A lot of times we have self-limiting beliefs and we let that keep us stuck. Some practical steps, getting dressed to shoes every morning. Maybe it's wearing a watch. I'm not as productive if I don't have my watch on. So there's nothing special about it. It's just a $30 watch from Target. But I know that when I have my watch on, it means that it's go time. It's time for me to work. Organize your space. Leave breadcrumbs so that when you get to a stopping point, you know where to pick back up the next day. And then focus on 1% better every day. 1% better every day is something that is talked about in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, and it's really talking about baby steps. And that's so, well illustrated here in this graphic, is that those small steps are going to get you to where you need to be further and faster because it's doable, it's manageable. So it's that famous saying of how do you eat an elephant? We love elephants here at UA. It's one bite at a time. And then focus on your frog. What is the thing that you're dreading most? Do that first. That's why most people tell you to work out in the morning, because for most people, that's their frog. This is attributed as a quote to Mark Twain when he said, "Eat a live frog first thing in the morning and nothing worse will happen to you the rest of the day." You can always come on Mark Twain for some fun anecdotal quotes. And then what gets scheduled gets done. The reason I'm going to the dentist tomorrow is that because it's scheduled for me tomorrow at 3 p.m. and I got a reminder and it's on my calendar. And if I don't go, I'm not going to have good dental health. I'm going to hear about it the next time I go. My hygienist is going to ask me why I canceled or skipped, and I may have to pay a cost if I don't show up to that. Put that same level of accountability on everything that's important to you and schedule it, and make sure that you keep your appointments with yourself. So your brain likes to process information, but it does not like to store it. Set a timer. The Pomodoro technique is a really helpful one. There are some free apps that you can use for that. Get it on paper. So regularly, put a brain drain, a brain dump on paper, make a to-do list, prioritize it, and then get it on your calendar. And then just remember that you are enough, that you have enough, and that you, will be enough. And so repeat positive affirmations, focus on your wellness basics. We have a class about that. And just remember that finding balance looks different for everyone. And these are the stacked Karens that I mentioned earlier. I know we're coming up on time, and if you have to go at 1 o'clock, that's fine. You can, but I am going to stay on. We do have some resources in this resources toolkit, and this is just giving you permission to put yourself and your health and your wellness first, and to really think about stress differently. So I'm just going to invite you, as we close out, for you to think about what are some things that you want to take action on, and do a mood check-in. Are you closer to the green smiley faces than you were when we started? I hope so. And if not, I hope you have some hope for that. Quickly, while I go to check the chat, I'm just going to walk you through. These are some additional slides in our wellness toolkit around stress and the wellness basics. This one slide from the presentation, some coping strategies. Miracle Morning, I love that. Committee of No has been one of the best helpers. I have a few friends who tell me, "Abby, no, you don't need to do that right now. You don't have time." The Eisenhower decision matrix that can help you make decisions. This is a really good one too, when you're looking at things you want to get off your plate. A couple of TED Talks, How to Make Stress Your Friend. Breathing techniques, Mel Robbins' mindfulness technique. Walking meditation that you can do here at the University of Alabama at CCN. We have this meditation labyrinth. If you have a desire to walk that or want more information, let me know. I'll be happy to share, but it's out in front of our nursing school, and that can help with mindfulness. Some other recommended archived webinars. a reminder to have something on the horizon to look forward to. The rule is 2-2-2 every 2 weeks, every 2 months, and every 2 years, have something to look forward to. This may be too much. It could just be as simple as scheduling a coffee or lunch date with a good friend, and having something to look forward to every month or every quarter. And then just remember to start where you are and use what you have and do what you can. Here's our social media, and I'll be happy to take your questions. I hope this was helpful. Please feel free to give comments or feedback. We are in the process of updating this class, and so that's why you see a lot of extra slides and information this time. And we're going to continue to cultivate this. We may even have a name change in the future so that we can have all of this great information in bite-sized pieces. There's a recommendation for the book Burnout. Yes, that book is so good, and we reference that in the Wellness and Work Life. That's one of the resources that we recommend for y'all in the Wellness Work-Life Balance class. Absolutely. Thank you, Terry. Thank y'all so much for this information. Thanks for the comments. I really appreciate all of the well wishes. Y'all so much. Any questions that y'all might have? Anything that I can answer for y'all? Thank y'all so much. Y'all can tell I'm passionate about this topic. We all need a reminder. So I have a question about, I know UA offers mental health assistance to students, but how can faculty staff reach out? Absolutely. We have the American Behavioral newsletter that goes out, a service through them that offers counseling. So you get 5 free appointments if you qualify. And then after that, you can still see your counselor, but you pay your copay. And it's really easy. You call a 1-800 number, and you can link all of that through doing just a quick search on the University of Alabama's website. And you tell them why you're needing to activate those 5 free counseling benefits. For a counselor, you also have the Betty Shirley Clinic here at the Health Center. You have the nurse practitioners who can then make referrals. There are in-house psychiatrists at the University Medical Center for employees with the faculty staff clinic. Yes, so many different options for faculty and staff. And I know we know a lot about the ones for students, but those are definitely some options there. If you have difficulty connecting with that, I'm happy to help you get those numbers and resources. Thank you so much. Oh, perfect. Miranda posted that in the chat. Where do you get the hug? Sloth? Well, I should bring Charlie to work and let him give out hugs. He would definitely do that if he could. COVID was really hard for him when I told him you can't hug everyone and you have to ask permission. Someone said, as someone who's used EAP, I highly recommend it. Absolutely. They do a lot of really great services. And a lot of times you can actually choose an in-network provider. So if you know of someone, you can just ask if they are an approved EAP provider. Since we don't have the EAP office as it used to exist, now you have some more options there. So even telehealth appointments, virtual counseling, all of those things are options. Those are great. Thank you. Any other questions or last comments? Miranda, I'm not sure if you shared the PowerPoint. There were a lot of comments, so it's hard to see if you've shared that. But yes, y'all can have access to that. Oh, if you scroll back up, it's around 12:50, and I bet she's going to pop it in again. But yes, it's in the chat. There's just a lot of chat comments. All right. Well, I want to be really respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you think of something that you would like to comment on or reach out to me about, we're happy to take that feedback, happy to connect you to resources if you need any extra help with that. If you have topics or things that you think would be great, any of that feedback, please feel free to reach out to me. I love doing these classes, and Miranda, Carolyn, and Ashley do an amazing job. They are wellness and work life, and I just get the privilege of joining y'all for these webinars, which has been a great thing for me. So really a part of my gratitude experience. So I hope you'll have a great rest of your day. Just remember to take one small action, and that's going to build on each other. And I hope you'll have a wonderful Wednesday. Roll Tide, y'all.